Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you guys like this stream down below before we get started. Subscribe if you're new. And we've got a decent amount to talk about. It's been a few weeks since we've last done a stream, so I think it's imperative that we do one right now. And we have some updates. We're going to be talking a lot about 2024, the new just absolute low state of the DeSPERATION campaign, the DeSantis campaign. They hit new lows every day. Also, Nikki Haley has hit some new lows lately as well. So I'm sure we're going to mix some of that into the mix because she is polling neck and neck with DeSantis. And I think that even though she doesn't really have like an online support base, she does have a real life support base that's not really that significant, just like the DeSantis one isn't super significant, but it's there and it should be talked about. There's no reason for anybody to be voting for DeSantis or Nikki Haley in a primary whatsoever. Both are not ideal candidates for several reasons that we've talked about and covered. But also, just before we start, we have to touch base on the Argentinian election, the anti-establishment conservative. Technically, it's the Libertarian Party, although they are a little bit different than like your average, Libertarian Party member here in America. The populist, the more libertarian, populist, anti-establishment, leaning conservative party, their leader won massively in an upset over the over the more liberal far left, or even just like neoliberal but not neoliberal, just like the leftist candidate. The leftist candidate ended up losing. The good candidate, the best candidate of the two, ended up winning. So Argentina will have better leadership. It's good to see that happen in Latin America. I wonder if there is some correlation. I know Argentina's not exactly on par with, your average, whatever you would think of like a Hispanic voter in this country. But it's interesting to see as some countries in South and Central America move to the right. Maybe this is a parallel theme we're seeing as some Latinos are moving right in this country. I don't know. It's possible. It is interesting to see that Donald Trump is going out there. The same guy who was bashing Univision all 2016, rightfully so, is now like having the Univision people in his corner for his presidential run. Donald Trump with a complete 180, a good 180, because he's, controlling certain institutions now that are very influential in certain communities. Univision, there's definitely a very, very large influence that they have on the Latino communities in this country. And if they're going to be more on Trump's side, that is absolutely huge. And if Trump actually does keep them in his corner, yeah, that's good news for Arizona. It's good news for Nevada. Great for Texas. Texas is wrapped up. Also, Greg Abbott endorsed Trump today as well. We'll touch base on that. DeSantis people, not too fond of that either. But also you're looking across the board, it's good news. But that's interesting there. On top of that, Louisiana, Republicans last night in Louisiana, another giant victory that came out of nowhere. Yeah, it's low turnout, but in some of these like deep blue counties where Republicans are winning, turnout was actually higher than it was the initial election for some of these races. And they still wiped the board with Democrats in Louisiana. So you want to touch base on the election drought. Yeah, I know Louisiana's Louisiana, but they're outperforming vastly. It shows that Republican voters in certain places are engaged. You could say, what about Kentucky? Well, you're facing strong Democrat who's more popular than he should be. What about Mississippi? Well, down ballot Republicans did very well in Mississippi, but the top of the ticket, Tate Reeves is hated. Tate Reeves is not exactly your ideal governor. He's just very unpopular for many reasons. And if he was running, 10 years ago, he would lose. So polarization definitely is what saved him in that race. But Louisiana has elected a Republican slate. The whole entire statewide offices, all the slate of them, the Senate as well, they are held by Republicans for the first time since I think 1876, during Reconstruction, by the way. And I know that technically in 2015 for like a couple months, because the Attorney General switched, they had the same thing. But you talk about an elected slate. We didn't have an elected slate ever in history until just recently. So you look at that there. Massive news for Republicans in the state of Louisiana. So there you go. And we're going to be covering certain things on this stream. It's definitely going to be a little bit more casual. We'll touch base on the super chats. I see we already got a big one. We're going to get to those in a minute for sure. But again, like the stream, make sure you subscribe if you want to use the live chat, because we don't tolerate freeloaders as much as we used to. But that being said, looking at this, the polls, I mean, you could say, well, the polls have been wrong in the past. And while I've criticized polls, I'll still criticize polls. Like the polls that had Trump down in Wisconsin, that's like a little bit more than the margin of error. These polls have a margin of error, probably about 5 points. Trump is beating DeSantis in every single poll by like 40, 45. It's getting disastrous. DeSantis has lost over half of his support since he announced, which is utterly embarrassing. In some polls, he's lost even more than that. Some polls, it's like 3 times his original support. Some polls have him in single digits. He's down there with Nikki Haley. New Hampshire, it looks bad for him. Iowa, like the guy's governor of Iowa, the acting governor of Iowa. He thinks he's governor of Iowa. Florida, his approval ratings have tanked. He moves to Iowa virtually. It's the one-state strategy. It never works. He's down in Iowa by like 30. And I do think Iowa is going to be closer than some of these other primaries just because of how much time and energy they're spending there. But the more time and energy DeSantis spends in Iowa just to lose it by less, he's going to lose even more ground in these other states like New Hampshire. Haley and Chris Christie, of all people, are ahead of Ron DeSantis in New Hampshire. South Carolina, you're seeing a little bit of a similar thing take place there, where Nikki Haley's in second place, Donald Trump still with a resounding first place placement there. And then Nevada, you're seeing Trump wipe the board. Michigan, Trump's wiping the board. Across the board, Donald Trump is winning. There's no time that we really should be wasting on this primary in terms of the resources, but instead they just want to make their statement. They want to throw out their Hail Mary because they're delusional. You can't beat Trump. Maybe you should, if you're worried about his like eluctability or whatever, maybe you should be, pushing back harder on these lawsuits, for example. I mean, honestly, that would be helpful. I still think Trump is going to win regardless. Some of these lawsuits are collapsing. They're being pushed back to 2025. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if some of the ones that get pushed back past his presidency get dropped because they're all just like toothless lawsuits for one. And for two, like if he doesn't end up winning in 2024, they're probably just going to sunset him because it's like, oh, well, he's not going to run again, whatever. But nevertheless, it is true that you're going to have probably some trials next year, and we'll see how those go. But the one we have for Florida, I think you have the Trump judge overseeing it. Like, overall, I don't think Trump's going to be in a jail cell. Even if he is, constitutionally, he can still run and win. And I don't think that you're going to see the polls have a 10-point shift like in one day, because everybody knows the charges are nonsense. Like you look in these polls, more people say Biden's age is a problem. Biden's cognitive ability is more of a problem than Donald Trump's legal issues or whatever. And it's like, either way, it doesn't really, people shouldn't care about it too much because you look at the charges, they're all nonsense. And on top of that, Donald Trump can just pardon himself day one. Imagine if he were to go win from a jail cell. It'd be pretty funny. It'd be awesome to see. He's just gonna, bang the gavel once, he's pardoned, boom, he's out of jail. He goes directly from the big house to the White House. I don't think it's going to happen, but honestly, like that would just be surreal. And given the time of politics we live in, it really wouldn't put it past me. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm not saying these things really help him, but I think in terms of the damages, a lot of it's already baked into the cake and he's still winning. And if Republicans can play their cards right to limit any further damages from them, they're going to be in a very good shape. So either way, that's the way I see it in terms of these charges. And in terms of the general, look at the polls for that too. Are all the polls fixed by Trump? That's what these DeSantis people think. They think all the polls are fixed by Donald Trump because Trump performs better than any other Republican. And maybe it's just like, look on the issues. They know Trump's better on the economy. He has a record. Does DeSantis have a record on the economy? I mean, like a lot of state governors have decent economies. That's not a record you can run on. The issue of abortion, you talk about what's more electable to the average voter. Trump kind of plays to both sides effectively, and some people on the right don't like that. I think for electoral strategy, that's probably the right thing to do, because let's say you run a campaign that says ban it, no exceptions, and then they lose by 20, and it's like, well, now you're going to have Roe v. Wade codified into federal law. It's going to be a big mess. They're going to claim that as a mandate. So you have to be tactful, and Donald Trump, I think, is tactful. I think with entitlements, he's tactful. And when you have people that criticize Social Security and Medicare, I agree that it could be a problem for sure, but you have to be careful about how you go about it. And I think it's one of those things that's better done legislatively than like on the campaign trail. So Trump with entitlements, he limits the losses there. So all they have is the dirt on him. That's why they're trying to really throw it at him in the first place. But even like crazy liberals are at this point, like realizing how bad things are. Like there is this wake-up call, and I'm not saying that we have to take it for granted, but you can't just say, well, the midterms are proving that Republicans can't win, but the midterms, Donald Trump and Joe Biden were both not on the ballot. These candidates that may have tried to emulate Trump falling short kind of proves that people prefer the real thing over something that's inauthentic. And then I look at DeSantis and what he's doing on the campaign trail. He basically is trying to be half-baked Trump whenever he's not taking subtle jabs at him, to the point where it's just like people aren't really going to like this. I think the midterms, if anything, tell you that Ron DeSantis is the more unelectable one, believe it or not, nationally. Even though he had a big victory in Florida, that is not the point. And if you take that out of context and run with that as like, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about the midterms, well, kind of proves that you lack the IQ to really read between the lines. But nevertheless, Trump is up big. The DeSantis people are in shambles because they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off because they don't know what to do. And this has been the case for a while, but it gets worse by the daily. And they're just desperate. Like all the attacks on Trump, it's like things you would see from ResistLib accounts, but I think it's even like worse. It's more egregious, the level of insanity that permeates from some of these people, even DeSantis's official accounts himself and the War Room account. Like, honestly, they'll take any little thing Donald Trump says that might be something that they think that they can spin negatively, and they do it. Which, obviously, if you're going to run a campaign that's capable of victory, that's not something that is really going to help you out. That's not something that's going to help you win, is just bashing Trump 24/7. I understand that DeSantis needs to, if you want to beat down the king, you got to attack him somehow. But if these are going to be the attacks, then it kind of proves you have no attacks or you're just dumb. And I think it's kind of a mix of the both here. DeSantis is really delusional. The fact he even entered this race in the first place, delusional. Now you could say, well, nobody's entitled to the nomination. And while that's true, you're not going to beat this guy. And if you think you have a shot, you're just not. I mean, nobody's entitled to it. But Donald Trump so far in the campaign trail started off with a 10-point lead, and he's widened that lead significantly, so much so to the point where he doesn't need a debate. I don't think he needs a debate. Might be entertaining for, a couple one-liners here and there, but let's be realistic here, guys. I mean, this nomination process, even though no votes have been cast, is pretty much over. And they'll say it's not over, but then these are the same people that are going to sit back here and say, well, if Donald Trump wins the primary, the election's over and Biden wins, even though the polls show Trump leading and they show Biden trailing by 45. And yeah, the polls can be wrong, but they're never going to be that wrong. It would take a national polling error of about 5 to 6 points for Trump to lose the Electoral College. And that doesn't really seem like it's viable. It really doesn't. Like, some people are Trump-only voters, or they're just low propensity. Yeah, the GOP is going to have to get them out to vote in future elections. I mean, they have a good apparatus now in Florida, but nonetheless, that apparatus doesn't exist in Wisconsin. Michigan definitely does not exist. So there needs to be leadership changes. I think Romney, McDaniel needs to go. I don't care if people say, well, Trump, well, you can't say that because Donald Trump said like one positive thing about her. It's like, yeah, I understand why you don't want to attack the RNC head right before an election. Obviously makes sense. But these people that are like, Trump endorsed her, this, that, and the other thing, trying to get a one-up on Trump. Trump said he liked both candidates. He didn't whip any votes for anybody. Some people around him did, but he also had people around him whipping votes for Mike Lindell, to the point where it's like, yeah, nobody's going to exactly go out there and make the claim that Trump was whipping votes for Lindell, because Trump stayed out of the whole thing. But yeah, you had people that were doing whatever behind the scenes. Doesn't exactly make sense. But it just shows that they're desperate to get any one-up on Trump they can. They are. This is kind of proof. Donald Trump goes out there and says that he helped Ernst and Grassley win their most recent elections, which, again, the Ernst thing is 100% true. She was lagging behind in the polling. She was actually losing to, I think, Greenfield or whatever her name was in the polling. But nevertheless, she won. Donald Trump being on that ballot definitely helped out. Your favorables were not that high. Would she have won if somebody else was on the ballot? Depends how they would do in Iowa, for sure. But I think Trump can take some credit for that, hands down. I mean, he did change Iowa. Iowa was not winnable even in 2000 when Bush won. Even in 2004, it was barely winnable. And then voted for Obama heavily twice. It was no guarantee in 2016. Some people were saying Trump wouldn't even win it. He won it by like 9. He won it by 8 again. He won it by more than Ronald Reagan won it in 1984 in his landslide win. This is a state that voted for Michael Dukakis over George H.W. Bush in 1988. I mean, this is not a red state whatsoever. And it's like 90% white and very rural. It should be a red state. Trump can obviously see that and play to the interests of Iowa very well based on his policies and other things. But nevertheless, Donald Trump definitely helped out Ernst. Chuck Grassley, I mean, I'm not going to say Trump takes credit for him becoming senator because Chuck Grassley's been a senator as long as Trump's been alive pretty much. Obviously, we know that. The guy's a dinosaur. But nevertheless, I mean, Trump definitely helped him out, per se, by like rallying for him. Grassley's approval dipped a lot compared to his past like juggernaut victories because he's old. I mean, that's just the way it is. States were less polarized back then. Oh, Iowa had a Republican senator. Doesn't mean it was a red state. I mean, you have Montana with a Democrat senator right now, and he's probably going to lose next year. But still, like, that's the bottom line. DeSantis goes on offense and says, well, Trump has a culture of losing in Iowa. These people are winning long before Trump came on the scene. And it's like, that's not like entirely true in the case of Ernst. She won in a very low turnout election, but these people winning does not change the fact that Iowa's a red state and Donald Trump helps out Republicans in Iowa. He does. I mean, DeSantis is probably trying to get the Grassley and Ernst endorsements, but I don't think they'd move the needle. The Reynolds endorsement doesn't move the needle. They think it does. Reynolds' approval rating's in the gutter. She's not helping out Ron DeSantis. If anything, she's holding his campaign back. Besides, whatever support he would gain from it was already baked into the cake because they've been hanging out together everywhere they go. But I said on this tweet, which everything is true, I give the full election analysis. You go back to the 1980s. Donald Trump holds those record margins in Iowa going back to 1980. The only reason why Reagan had a higher margin in 80 compared to 84 was because of mainly because of the fact that there was a third party that was taking votes from both sides, but in some states it took more votes away from Democrats and Republicans. But nevertheless, it's objectively true Trump brought about the realignment. Everybody knows that. DeSantis trying to undercut Trump on that fact just proves that he doesn't understand how politics works and he's just desperate for a leg up on Donald Trump that he's not going to get. And I tweeted this out and they hit me with a community note because apparently what I said was untrue, which it was true, but they still hit me with a note because they're dumb and they use this community note system. It's been proven that it's mainly a DeSantis thing where Trump accounts will apply or people that support Trump will apply. They get rejected. They make a burner DeSantis account. They get instantly accepted. And the DeSantis team has been using this as like a way to be like fact checkers. And it's just weird. It just proves that like this is no different than like what you're seeing people like Nikki Haley say when it comes to monitoring social media, which, by the way, I'm not fully against community notes. Sometimes, it will be helpful, and it usually takes an overwhelming majority of people that are, reading a note and rating on a note to say that the note should stand. But still, it can be weaponized because you don't have this fair system because you're preventing certain people. And all they do is lie and bend the truth. So you're going to have some apparatus to back you up regarding these things. And that's why they have community notes on their side, because if it's on their side, they're not going to be able to get called out, which, again, their conduct in general is causing them to lose support. More so than anything else, is a reason why DeSantis has lost support since he's announced, why he's lost support since his influencer base is running wild on social media. But apparently, this note was added, which is untrue. It said Trump did not win Iowa by more than Reagan in 1984. It says Reagan won Iowa in 1984 by 53 percentage points. He won it by 7. They said he won it by 53 points. Apparently, Trump won Iowa with less of the vote, which is true, but his margin was greater. Third-party candidates were not as big of a deal back then as well. And still, even if Reagan did win it by like 0.2% more, which he didn't, that's still impressive for Trump, given the fact he lost the popular vote by like 4.5, whereas Reagan won it by like 20 points. So the community note post was 100% wrong. It still stood for like a day. Like, this is how desperate they're getting. They have to like twist the most inconsequential things that are objectively true. They still can't let it stand. They still can't. I would have to lie too if I was polling at 8%. I would have to lie if I was this desperate. Yes, I probably would be lying, but I'm not desperate because we're going to win the primary. We're at this rate going to win the general. If the election was today, Donald Trump would easily defeat Joe Biden. And I think that as we get closer to election season, I clearly believe that there's a very good shot that he will beat him a year from now. I think he could beat him by what the polls are saying right now. He could possibly beat him by more than what the polls are saying, because the American people are fed up with this administration. They are, by all metrics, every single one of them. They do not like Joe Biden. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden on the same ballot, Donald Trump is going to win. Donald Trump's favorability is higher than it was when Trump won in 2016. Biden's is lower than Hillary Clinton's was in 2016. If anything, it's like around what Donald Trump's was in 2016. And you look at the people that oppose both, they're not polling, as highly with Biden as they were back in 2020, to the point where it's like, yeah, there is a legitimate climate shift that cannot be ignored that's happening right now in our political climate. It's just the way it's going. You don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. And also on top of that, Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. And I look forward to streaming the Iowa caucus. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of these DeSantis accounts deactivating by either late January, mid-February, or possibly some will be around at Super Tuesday. I don't know how long Ron would want this charade to go on for. I really don't. But that's the way it is. But you're looking at this, and it's like the campaign is a disaster. I mean, there's no way to chalk it up. And this is something that you might say is a little bit trivial, but it kind of encapsulates how awful his campaign is. So they're running this merchandise deal where they're selling a T-shirt that is supposed to take a shot at Nikki Haley, because Nikki Haley is awful, and I guess we'll find some common ground on there with these people. The only reason why they hate Nikki Haley is because she's running against Ron DeSantis. A lot of these people would vote, not all of them, but a lot of these people would vote for Nikki Haley over Donald Trump because they just hate Donald Trump that much. So they're trying to dunk on Haley, and then Haley eating DeSantis. It's the same like Rubio-Bush thing back in the day. Some DeSantis people say Haley's an agent for Trump because they're just insane and delusional, when in reality was Jeb Bush a legitimate like mole for Donald Trump, when in reality he obviously was not, when he was spending money against Rubio and vice versa. Like, that's not how it works. It's a bad strategy, which is true, that they're both employing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one's a mole or the other one is. But they're selling a T-shirt with Nikki Haley's name on it. And like, you look at this T-shirt, and obviously it's taking a shot at the thing she said about she wants everyone to be verified by their name on social media. It should be a disaster. It'd be dangerous. There's no reason why anybody should support that. She's basically wanting a government database. Every single thing you've ever said in history, that's public. It's like a social credit score. And it's like, this is going to be a limitation on free speech virtually, if it were to go into effect, which it's not going to, because Nikki Haley's not going anywhere. But you look at this and you see the quote, and like, if you're just walking by somebody with this T-shirt, because usually if you have a T-shirt, like the one I'm wearing right now is like an alternative version of my logo on it. You're trying to go out, and it says Red Eagle Politics on the bottom. We'll probably start selling them as we get closer to election season. But nevertheless, like, when you see these shirts, you're promoting something. if I'm walking by somebody and they have a shirt that says Nikki Haley for president on, even if they have like a quote of her saying something like that I disagree with, you will think that person is supporting Nikki Haley for president. You're basically selling merchandise that's for a rival campaign, thinking it's going to help your own campaign. This is awful. This is malpractice. And if this is the way the campaigns run, you're not beating Biden. You're going to be selling T-shirts of Biden saying something about transgenders on the front, and then it's going to say Biden for president. Like, imagine that. Like, if I see somebody wearing that T-shirt walking down the street, I'm probably going to think they're some libtard Biden supporter. There's no way to chalk it up. So that's the way I see it. That's the way most people see it. And the fact that they think this is a good idea speaks volumes to how awful their campaign is. It really does. Like, this is just laughable. There's a lot to unpack here, as we know. But it's like, if this is the campaign you're running, like, you're going to lose. You are. DeSantis would not beat Biden. I don't care how unpopular Biden is. DeSantis' campaign is being run awful. It's one of the worst campaigns I've ever seen. Donald Trump's campaign is run spectacularly so far, whether people want to admit it or not. There's a reason why, despite being 4 times indicted, he has risen in the polls and DeSantis has collapsed. It's because Donald Trump is running a very, very skilled, tactful campaign. The messaging is far better than 2020. Everybody can see it. On top of that, he's getting like all these delegations of all these states in Congress, the more solid people in Congress, to endorse him. Like, out of the gate, the unleashing of all of the endorsements from Florida just to embarrass Ron DeSantis, and all DeSantis can cling to are a few Iowa state legislators that nobody's ever heard of. It's like there's a clear contrast in the campaigns here, and Trump is in good graces with a lot of these people that are in the House now. You're seeing changes to House leadership, which is not entirely due to Donald Trump only, but still, it's going to help him out vastly when you talk about a Trump agenda. Because if Trump wins, the Republicans already have the Senate, even if they don't win Montana or Ohio, which obviously they're going to win if Trump wins. But nevertheless, I mean, if even if it's 50-50, Donald Trump would still technically have the Senate. We want to expand a majority beyond that, of course. And the House, you're probably going to hold the House. You might even gain in the House. My last House prediction had Republicans gaining for a reason. I didn't expect it when I went in to predict every seat. And I even said, okay, we'll give some leeway here. Here, we'll give these seats to the Dems. Republicans still have the majority. So either way, the campaign, you see that there, and just the way that he's really been running it so far. And he doesn't even have to waste a lot of resources. Like, yeah, he's spending some money in Iowa. You don't want to leave any stones unturned, and you definitely want to bury these people in the primary. But everything he's doing, he's being very tactful. He's making sure that his campaign is run smoothly, and it's run smoothly whether people want to agree or not. And it's not like, oh, there's just some major cult that needs to be deprogrammed, because Trump has gained significantly in the polls from the start of the year. So clearly there were people that were iffy and were window shopping. They're not in a cult, but then they realized how awful everything else is, and then they're back on the Trump train. That's what it comes down to. Like, yeah, there's going to be people that vote for Trump no matter what, but I mean, you look at all these alternatives, and I mean, it's very, very telling how Donald Trump is on top of the competition there. So either way, you see what happens. Trump's also even getting these endorsements of governors. Oh, DeSantis got Reynolds in Iowa, the most unpopular governor in the country right now, which, again, I don't fully always trust Morning Compost, but still, relatively speaking, every metric shows she's underwater. There's all these raised questions about her dealings with farmland and China, and you see Greg Abbott endorsing Donald Trump in Texas. Abbott's iffy. He's not the best governor either, but still, he has a lot more pull, and Texas is a major state. And whether people like it or not, Greg Abbott is wildly popular in the state of Texas, despite supporting a full ban on abortion in Texas without much exception. He won against a candidate who spent quite a bit of money by like over 10%. I mean, Texas, that's a state you need. That's a state you'd like to run up the margins in, and Donald Trump is capable of it. And you see these people are in full meltdown mode Because, oh, they were defending Abbott. They were saying, oh, these Trump cultists are calling him a rhino, which I think that there's bigger rhinos than Greg Abbott. Obviously, I think Abbott has done some rhino things that needed to be called out, and I still will call him out for it, obviously. But they're just mad at Greg Abbott. Oh, he endorsed the politician who made Texas competitive, which Donald Trump didn't make Texas competitive single-handedly. I think these neocon immigration policies have played a major role in that. And I'm not saying that Trump has been the greatest historical fit for Texas, but are other Republicans not named Trump really doing that much better? Cornyn was on the same ballot. He only outperformed Trump by a couple of points. Like, yeah, he did better in the suburbs, but I mean, the margin of like a down ballot Republicans compared to Trump in Texas is narrowing, and Trump is like killing it in the Texas primary. Like, Texas is slowly becoming kind of a MAGA state. You are kind of seeing that, especially with the shifts in southern Texas and kind of a cultural change and people, transplants moving to Texas that are more Republican than you would think. I'll leave it at that. But still, meltdowns across the board. You're seeing this here. Either way, these people, it's just insanity. But we have to get to super chats. I promise it'd be a more casual stream, and it will be, but we're going to get to super chats right now. So, Tucson PaleoCon for $50 is interesting developments happening in the Arizona Senate race. Things are looking good for Kerry. Yeah, everybody who doubted the Kerry Lake for Senate thing is kind of eating crow. And I'm not saying it's a done deal. I'm not saying she's guaranteed victory. Nothing can be taken for granted. But what I will say is her campaign is extremely competent because people, even myself included, I said, was there too much bridge burning back in 2022? Maybe. Now she's going to dinners with or hosting them, or I don't know what she's doing, but she's meeting with her primary opponent from last time, who I despise 100% of the way, but still, you can't leave those bridges burned because there's a lot of people that if the primary was reconciled in terms of the feud that they had back in 2022, a lot more people probably would have come around and to helping Kerry Lake in the whole primary process. And also, Lake has a very good relationship with the Senate leadership that we're seeing there. She's getting endorsements from people like Barrasso. Steve Daines is saying he's going to fund her candidacy. He thinks it's going to be competitive, which it would be. And it's like, yeah, there's no reason for any Republican not to support Lake at this point because she's going to win the primary. She's got a very good chance to win the general. Kirsten Sinema is a Prada-socialist, self-described. She votes with Biden 100% of the time. And Lake is reaching out to voters across the spectrum, it seems. She's not, because people will say, oh, she's bashing the McCain people too much. And it's like, well, now she's saying Biden voters come in. Now she's not saying McCain voters get out. So you're seeing a shift in Kerry Lake's messaging. Her campaign website is ideal. Her abortion stance is, if you read it for a Republican electorally speaking, it's probably one of the best pages for an issue I've ever seen, and it does seem as if she's going to have a very good shot, especially because a lot of people that are voting for Trump, his floor in Arizona is like in the high 40s. I feel like Lake is going to get a lot of those supporters at the end of the day, even if she doesn't have them all now. Because why are you going to vote for Trump, who is like, oh, well, Trump bashes McCain, bad fit for Arizona. These are the things they say, and then they'll turn around and vote for Sinema because, oh, Lake is too mean or whatever. It's like, I understand some people aren't really the biggest fan of the 2022 stuff and the post-election fallout, but I do think that with good messaging and time, that definitely heals. And if she's really kind of building bridges within the GOP, she's going to be fine because at that point, there's going to be communication, there's going to be guidelines, and she's going to be able to, utilize that to her advantage, so that she's not like left on an island where she loses by 15 points like Doug Mastriano did. So, and that's the way I see it. I don't think that's out of bounds. So I am supporting Lake. I feel like I've made that very clear. She's going to be the only main one running. Mark Lamb has been pretty much MIA since Lake's announced, and I don't know if he's going to drop out anytime soon. I think he should drop out and endorse Kerry because she's going to win the nomination, and there's no need for a divided primary. That's another main issue with 2022 that people don't talk enough about, but it's true. Everyone wants to blame Trump for everything. There's like 30,000 different factors here at play. They don't want to look at those other factors because blaming Trump is the easy thing to do. It's lazy, and it helps their 2024 argument be a little more bolstered just because an incumbent governor in Florida won. Wow, big deal. Big deal. All right. Mike M says, what are your thoughts on the Ben Shapiro-Candace Owens feud? I think Candace Owens is in the right. I mean, Ben Shapiro goes out there and just eviscerates or tries to personally attack Candace Owens at like a private event, which he's got to know he's being filmed. And he's like, her comments are disgraceful. What comments, Ben? He's not even saying what comments. Obviously, he's referring to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it's like she's basically saying that we don't need to be involved and that we don't need to, unconditionally support a certain country because every country has their flaws and every country does things that are not ideal. And I think her take is pretty level-headed. I don't think she has like a horse in the race. Ben Shapiro has been a big supporter of Israel. He's tweeted about Israel like thousands of times over like the past year. I mean, it's pretty clear he is a horse in the race. And Candace Owens, he's attacking her because she happens to take a more nuanced perspective on the conflict, which again, we don't need to be getting involved. We don't need to be spending money. And Candace Owens is 100% right that why are a lot of these donors, even some on the right, are pulling out of colleges because of Israel, but that's where they're drawing the line. Why weren't they drawing the line at the indoctrination, the anti-white hatred? But because you have a few pro-Palestinian demonstrations, now you're seeing the funding be pulled. It's like, seriously? Like, Shapiro is in the wrong here, and he's a neocon. He wants war. We know that. We've seen it throughout his whole entire career. Candace Owens is somebody who is taking a more nuanced approach, and I think it's the right approach. I think she's 100%. Everything she said, I agree with. Watch the whole thing with Tucker. Agree with it 100%. So those are my thoughts on it. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous feud to begin with, but I mean, that's just what happens. It's funny because Shapiro doesn't have that much power within the Daily Wire, so it's going to be very difficult for Owens to get fired. So she's going to be there. And it seems like people like Matt Walsh, I have disagreements with Matt Walsh. He is a dissimp, obviously, we know that. But nonetheless, he is somebody that has said similar things, and it seems like a lot of people at the Daily Wire get it on certain issues more so than A, they did in the past, and B, they get it more than Ben Shapiro does. So yeah, interesting climate shift there that we're seeing. And it's true. I mean, we have to take the America First approach 100% of the time. I mean, that has to be a doctrine. We're not we're not saying that, we have to have this exception here, that exception here. I mean, the bottom line is that Israel can take care of themselves. And there are more pressing issues in the country than a conflict that's been happening for years that's taking place halfway across the globe. It's the same thing with Ukraine and Russia. You might say, well, it's a little bit different because people on the left are supporting Palestine or whatever. And I'm not saying that the conflicts are 100% identical or that they're morally equivalent, but the stance that we need for both is stay out. We don't need to be giving aid. And that's the bottom line. You have people like Nikki Haley saying America needs Israel. It's like, we don't need Israel. America existed long before the state of Israel existed, and it's existed with the state of Israel, not because of Israel. Israel was just there. I mean, that's how it works. Like, we don't need these other nations more than they need us. We really don't. They're not funding us. They're not giving us billions of dollars in aid every year. They're not helping us secure our border. Why do we have to help them secure theirs? We can't even secure our own. And you could say, well, we got to walk and chew gum at the same time. No, we can't. Look at our government. The government can't do anything right. The notion that we're going to be able to instantly walk and chew gum at the same time is ridiculous, first of all. Like, we have priorities. We have to get things done. That's the bottom line. Cameron Campbell says, play the language game like the Democrats. I support common sense restrictions on second and third trimester abortions. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I said that verbatim in my last stream that I did, and it's true. Abortion's killing us. And Republicans, there is this need to, we have to be outspoken and say the right thing all the time that people want to hear. And I understand that abortion, in my opinion, is reprehensible. It's not something that should ever be viewed in a positive light. I think that there's a reason why even people that get them typically feel shame about it. It's not because of society per se. Society's accepted it. The bottom line is it's something that's a traumatic experience because it's wrong. You're ending a life, and that's tough. But a lot of people, for some reason, are not ready to say, let's make it illegal. So there are steps we need to do, and I think you can move the Overton window, and you're going to have to do it by making, light of these positive pro-life changes. Some people say it's all or nothing, but that approach always gets you nothing if the all approach is significantly within the minority, which it is. It's significantly within the minority. So when you look at somebody who is championing like a 6-week ban, that's not going to be as electable as somebody who says, oh, we'll make a deal. We'll see. We're going to want to come to an agreement that would pass the Senate and get both sides involved. And maybe you'll see some positive things come out of that, which is what Trump is saying compared to what some of these other candidates in the mix are saying, which now Nikki Haley is desperate. Now she was the one that back at the debate, I thought her stance at abortion was too soft by far, even for electoral reasons, because her approach was just like, it really felt like it was taking a lot of people and just like kind of shafting them, people that thought any restriction should be in place. But nevertheless, you're looking at how she's managed her campaign recently. Now she's like saying, oh, I'd support a 6-week ban. And it's like, yeah, it's not going to be, it's not electable. It's not going to get you anywhere. And I know I like to trash the electability arguments, and that's true, but still, you have to play within the system. Electability is a real thing. Donald Trump's the electable one. That's the thing that a lot of people just don't realize. So, yeah, it's about viability, no pun intended, regarding the abortion debate. But you say, what makes a candidate viable? Well, they can't have this, this, and this. And you look at policy positions that are ridiculously unpopular, because immigration, our policies, hardline immigration policies are popular. They're more popular than people think. There's a reason why Trump ran on them 2016, did extremely well in certain parts of the country, because people like them. And now I think people are going to be even more supportive of them. I think there were polls that came out that said even a majority of Biden voters support a wall now, because they understand what's going on is ridiculous. So there's a difference between, not being a total cuck where it doesn't work, and like actually using the system to your advantage by, changing the way you word certain things, and maybe saying we're going to set a realistic goal, we're going to achieve it, then we're going to set another realistic goal, and then we're going to achieve it. So it's about the way that things are moving for sure. This issue is kind of like a third rail past a certain point for Republicans, and they just have to manage. It's just like we're gonna get rid of Social Security and Medicaid type thing. It never works. You can say, it actually would be the right thing. Or you could say privatized Social Security would actually increase returns for some people if it's in low risk. And I agree with that to an extent. I think it would depend on how it's done, if I'd support it or not. But you can't say, I support privatizing Social Security. That's not something people support, whether you think it would help then solve the national debt issue or not. So Cameron Campbell says Nikki's more likely to get second than run. I think in terms of delegates, this might be true. In terms of momentum, it's possible if they're like neck and neck, or if Haley's ahead in like the 3 of the first 4 states, that, Super Tuesday, Haley might outperform Ron in some places, which I'm not saying is a good thing. You could say, look at you, DeSantis, you're down there, you're losing. Take the L, you're even behind Haley. This is laughable, but at the same time, Nikki Haley, the fact that she has any support base is kind of just downright terrifying to me, especially after all the things she said, because we always have this like notion that Haley is this neocon, which she is, but we didn't know she would be like, I didn't know she'd run a campaign that's like a caricature of herself, but that's just the way she is under the national spotlight. She is just not it at all. And she's going at Vivek because Vivek is the only one that has a reasonable foreign policy on the debate stage. That's the way it is. It's another thing with DeSantis is he doesn't jump in, and this is another thing that I think is holding him back. He just says whatever he's told to say by his advisors. He never jumps in for an attack. He barely does. And if he even does, it's like, you're going to say this at this time. He doesn't go at Nikki Haley. He doesn't go at Vivek. He's not a fighter, and that's not what American people like to see. They don't like to see that. He's not even willing to jump in and attack. Even Biden at the Democrat primary debates back in like 2020, I think he jumped in a lot more, even as incoherent as it was at times, compared to somebody like DeSantis. And that's kind of an issue. And you're going to have to draw a contrast. Having Biden's level of charisma is not a flex. And Biden at least comes off as human. There's a little charm element to Biden. I despise Biden, want him out of the White House. But everybody can agree that you can look at Biden and you could like sort of, a lot of people feel bad for Biden, for example. Obviously I think that there's a lot more to the story than people should just feel bad for him, but you look at him, you can tell this guy's human. especially when he's making these mistakes and he's being goofy. But you look at DeSantis, he's just like a robot. And like even Marco Rubio, he was like the robot of 2016, but he kind of came off like a genuine person at times, more so than not. He was somewhat likable. And obviously I disagree with him on a lot of policy, especially that he held back then. Like he's gotten better since then, but still, I mean, Rubio would probably fare better in a primary than DeSantis, because Rubio, I think, is somebody that could actually have the charisma and ability, even if it's a little fake and manufactured, to go out there and peel off some voters. So that's the way I see it. Mr. Jimmy says, could the Palestine issue hurt the Biden coalition? Well, yeah, I mean, you're understanding now that like the whole woke stuff, the coalition can't stand, because you have some of these like woke people that are calling for the death of certain ethnic groups on both sides of the conflict, by the way. And it's like this coalition can't stand. This is the problem with what they call like intersectionality. It doesn't work. You're going to have these conflicts of interest and it just falls apart. The woke coalition is a very weak one on its surface level. You kind of are seeing that with Hispanics to a certain extent overall. I mean, now they're saying Hispanics are white. What about the rise of Hispanic white supremacy or whatever? Because they are talking about that in the media more so than not. So it is true. These coalitions rarely are able to stand for long periods of time. Their coalition's not sustainable. And I think as awful as the Republican Party is, as awful as their apparatus can be at times in certain places, the Democrats are no world beaters either. And people need to understand this. It speaks volumes that their best candidates, or in terms of like electoral overperformance compared to what people expected, just went missing. Because when they stayed generic, it helped them. John Fetterman not campaigning helped him more likely than not. Katie Hobbs not debating helped her. If she debated, Kari Lake would be governor right now. Even though she was slammed for not debating, I think if she debated, things would have gotten worse for her. So that's the way I see it. Cameron Campbell also says, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have fun plans. Well, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. This is probably going to be the last stream I do before Thanksgiving. So Richard S. says, if DeSantis can't even run a primary exactly. People don't understand this. It's not like DeSantis is like polling stable. Well, he's polling stable now, but he's like at a fault line. It's like he's not getting anywhere. He's just like staying there down at like 10%. And falling in certain states, in certain places like New Hampshire, for example, he's down like below Vivek in some polls, or close to that at least. But yeah, he's not going to be capable of victory. If he was running a campaign that was polling respectably, like he was in the 30s, he might have an outside shot. He still would lose, probably be worse off for the party if it was that divided. But I mean, nonetheless, it would be a disastrous thing for him to get to the general if he's polling at the rate he's polling now. Like, let's say Trump did get convicted on something and the RNC awarded all the delegates to DeSantis. DeSantis would bomb in the general. He'd absolutely go out there and be decimated, because a lot of Trump supporters wouldn't turn out, or they would view the primary as acquired per se. And it'd be legitimate grievance, because they just take all the delegates and just throw the voters' intentions out the window, which they're not going to do that, thankfully. But imagine how poorly DeSantis would do if he even beat Trump in a primary. This is what the DeSantis people don't understand about electability. And then you could say, well, what about Trump just getting out of the way? Well, at that point, would DeSantis fare better in a general? Well, it's entirely possible compared to the other thing, but you're looking at how awful his campaign has been run so far. I'm not sure he would. And if Trump didn't run, I don't even think DeSantis would win the nomination at this rate. I mean, Vivek would probably be doing a lot better. Nikki Haley would even be competitive. You'd probably have a contested convention that would, eventually rally behind Nikki Haley, which is a terrifying thing to see. So overall, we should be glad, regardless of whatever side of the primary that we're on, that Donald Trump's going to be this nominee when it's all said and done. Of course, losers make excuses. They will make excuses. It's not going to change the fact that Donald Trump is the best candidate in the running, hands down. You can't, even if he goes down to Biden, he's still the best candidate in the running, regardless. Nothing's, guaranteed, but we got a real shot here, so we got to go out there and win this thing. Mike M. says, do you think Mike Johnson releasing more footage on Jan 6 will impact the election? I mean, I think it's a good thing that he did it, but I don't think it's going to directly impact the election because we already had enough footage that kind of showed that the official narrative was bogus. And having more footage helps bolster the argument, but it seems like that's sort of just set in stone regardless. I don't think a lot of voters care about it. A lot of voters don't care about 1-6, and they didn't care about it in 2022 either. That's not one of the reasons for the underperformance is 1-6. Had nothing to do with it whatsoever. And you see that in different responses in different states, even when you have certain quote-unquote MAGA candidates running. Because they don't talk about the MAGA candidates who won. They only talk about the ones who lost, and they can't even define MAGA candidates, just anyone they could loosely tie to Trump who lost an election. Because Oz and Walker ran as generic conservatives. Oz even ran as like a liberal Republican per se. By and large, they blame Trump for that somehow, despite them running different campaigns from somebody like a Mastriano, who ran a hardliner campaign, compared to somebody like Dixon, who just ran like a generic campaign. I mean, she was more of a DeVos type of candidate, the DeVos family in Michigan, than a Trump candidate. I mean, Trump liked her, but I don't think that really influenced any voters negatively from Dixon in the election. Whitmer's just popular. She shouldn't be. A lot of people, I guess, have Stockholm syndrome. I don't know, but she was relatively popular. A lot of governors are popular. Every governor is pretty much above water except Kim Reynolds, and Ron DeSantis is getting down there too. And I think Tate Reeves is probably below water as well. But Kurtzy28 says, will you give my channel a shout out? I do political videos. Well, there's your shout out, Kurtzy28. I have 11K subs and I'm looking for a co-host for election night coverage. Well, I can't fill that role. I have my own stream for that, but I mean, if there's somebody out there who knows. Cameron Campbell says, when I'm going to ruin my own future competition. Yeah, I think I posted that meme back in the day. When I'm going to ruin my own future competition, my opponent's Ron DeSantis. Yeah, he's done that. He's ruined his own future. I mean, there's no way to argue against it. He's not going to go anywhere in 2028 because this was his chance, even by his own logic. That's why he ran. Didn't work out so well. Cameron Campbell says, what do you think Lake Strengths will be as a senator? I think her voting record is just going to be solid overall, especially for like a swing state. So I think that's what you get out of her. Josh Light, thank you for the 5. Cameron Campbell says, people can't understand you could support allies without war or spending money. Yeah, I mean, you could give verbal support. I thought the original tragedy, the 10/7 or whatever date it was horrific. But that doesn't mean we need to be all emotional and fund certain conflicts just because one side did something bad. I mean, that's the way it works. I'm not happy with any sort of terror that takes place anywhere in the world. Obviously, disavow it, but you can't be so emotional about these things. You can't just start picking sides and throwing money at it and sending troops. You got to know what you're getting into. I mean, the problem post 9/11 was everybody wanted to go into the Middle East, and I could understand where they're coming from, but it was not the right thing to do. What we should have done is cut immigration to zero, grinding halt, secure the border, and we could have actually had a pro-America trade policy. We could have used the patriotism and actually turned it into something good for us. We could have actually gone out there and had the country, the American dream, back once again, and we'd have the grounds and the mandate to do it. But instead, we had forever wars, and we have a thing called the Patriot Act, which is basically created a surveillance state. And obviously, you see people like Nikki Haley want to go out there and make it worse. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that a lot of people need to understand about this conflict and any conflict in the world. It's not just Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine. We'll see. We're probably going to see other conflicts. I think we'd see less of them if you had Donald Trump in the White House, somebody to go overseas and negotiate and make deals, because he did a wonderful job of that during his presidency. And now you see the DeSantis people trashing him because, they say he called Hezbollah smart. It's like, these people commit acts that are egregious. He's saying, don't underestimate them. Some of these people are intelligent, which is factually true. They act like the liberal media does. Oh, Trump said something positive about Xi Jinping's smart. Okay, I don't like the guy, but he's smart. Trump said something positive about the Taliban or whatever. It's like, you don't understand how foreign policy works. So we praise Putin. It's like, yeah, he wants to get things done where you're not going to have us getting involved in these conflicts. He wants to de-escalate them. If he's got to butter up Putin a little bit, so be it. Why am I supposed to care about it? Putin's kind of like this boogeyman anyways, by and large. A lot of people just have Russian derangement syndrome. Not saying Russia's perfect or that I'm like a diehard Russia supporter or a Russian asset. I'm just saying that you have people that will take everything to the extreme. Oh, you said one positive thing about Putin. You must be a Russian agent. Let's throw this guy out of the country. It's like, that's not how these things work. Literally, it's not how these things work. But that's how people make these arguments. So Cameron Campbell says, who do you think would be a great senator for Utah? Staggs, I think, is the guy. I haven't seen polling. I don't know who else would jump in, but we need somebody in that's a lot better than Mitt Romney, and we're going to get that pretty effortlessly, so long as you don't have one of these like Lincoln Project types that they're going to try to throw out their win. Sam Harrison says, are all the court dates for Trump moved to after the election? Not all of them, but some of them. The Georgia case is falling apart. That's the one he got the mugshot in. Like, that's kind of like collapsing at the seams because Fani Willis is a moron, and pretty much every single thing in that, like, if you actually look at the transcript of the phone call he made to Raffensperger, nothing illegal was said. He's like, I want to find these votes. Like, okay. Even if he doesn't find them, it's not illegal to ask. He didn't threaten. He didn't coerce. He didn't say anything that was blatantly illegal, but you still have people, even in the DeSantis camp, that are cheering on Trump's destruction because they're just insane. These people need to be checked, in many cases, into a mental ward because that's how they behave. They've got TDS, the worst TDS. I mean, resist libs were bad, but they were not, there's no way they were this bad. And at least they didn't claim to be on my side. They didn't claim to be conservative. They didn't claim to be Republican. Like, these people on the there's a big mess that's going to have to be cleaned up. A lot of them are going to bend the knee anyways and come back to Trump, but it's like they got to be hazed on their way back in. This is a disaster. These people, man. John Waffle says it's important to remember Haley K for the woke mob banned the flags at the Capitol. Yeah, exactly. She's not conservative whatsoever. And people said, well, it's a bad flag or whatever. It's like, first of all, a lot of people that fly that flag fly it because they're proud to be Southern. I know many people that are proud to be Southern. They like the flag. Rappers from the South, black rappers used to fly that flag back in the day, back in the 90s. It was like a co-opted hip-hop symbol for a short period of time as well. But like you see polls back then, 2005, percentage of people that got a negative reaction when they saw a Confederate flag, which I'm not like one of these pro-Confederate people. I'm not one of these people that's like all into the Civil War, picking sides, whatever. I'm a Northern boy. I'm from Michigan. I mean, I'm a Union individual, but if people want to fly that flag, I don't care. You know, it's part of history. If it's at the Capitol grounds and it's been there for how many years, should be there. Why not? I don't see a problem with it. Just because some person did something bad who happened to fly the flag doesn't mean that every single millions of Americans that fly that flag are instantly implicated in that. It's not how it works. I mean, you have mentally ill people doing mentally ill things, and they should be punished to the full extent of the law, which they were. And still, the liberals were mad because one family said that they didn't support the death penalty. So it was, even when they're punishing the white supremacists, they're going against the family's wishes. This is like white supremacy extreme edition. I don't know, whatever they were saying. But the bottom line remains the same. You're never going to appease certain people. And Haley tried to appease people by taking the flag down. It doesn't stop at the Confederate flag. It will extend to everything else. You see Abraham Lincoln statues being torn down. They're calling Abraham Lincoln, he's a white supremacist. He did this, that, and the other thing. It's like, it's not how it works. It's not how it works. So, whatever. She's not conservative. Exactly. If I was going to be elected governor of a state in the South, which I don't think is going to happen in my lifetime, but yeah, I'm not changing the flag to appease the woke mob. It's like, you could say Mississippi's flag is more aesthetic now, and I don't think it's the worst flag design in the world, but I mean, Tate Reeves, a part of the reason why he underperformed was caving into the woke mob. I mean, there are people out there who, in Mississippi, only voted for Reeves because they wanted the flag to stay the way it was, and he said the people could vote on the flag or whatever. and then he gets in there, changes the flag, caves to the woke mob. This is a problem. Stop caving to these people. They will never like you. They will never forgive you, regardless of whatever you do. There's no reason to cave. And when you cave, like, that's the new norm. When you cave and you say, well, you can't say Washington Redskins anymore, then every other team that's even vaguely similar, they'll change it. That's why you have the Commanders. That's why even you have the Chiefs' name is now on the chopping block. No pun intended. But, like, I don't think it's likely going to change anytime soon. I think, if anything, you might see the inverse. I think you might see the backlash. We're seeing the backlash to it. I mean, with the Commanders, there's a Native American group that's actually suing the team to change it back to the Redskins. I don't know if that's going to be successful. I don't know what's really going to come out of that, but still it shows that people are fed up. People they want to be done with this nonsense. People just want the culture to be what it was. You know, when people are going to be offended, they should not have their emotions be catered to until those opinions become the majority and culture just gets cucked and literally everything just becomes gay, for lack of a better term. So Matt V says, sup, man, I'm an 18-year-old Marine. What do you think will happen to everything that's going on with Hamas if Trump is elected again? Well, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of deployments, hopefully, if Donald Trump goes out there and wins. I will say that he's probably going to have to de-escalate the tensions. He could do it very easily. He's a smart guy. He thinks in a very strategic manner when it comes to making deals. And he made a lot of deals with Israel and countries that used to be enemies or unfriendly in the Middle East. And I hope he goes and does it again, just so we don't have to stay involved, so we don't have to be funding these countries, which we shouldn't be funding them anyways. But ideally, you would have, you'd use your negotiation power to make sure that, okay, well, maybe next time when you have a president who's not like Donald Trump, who's not America first, if they ever do assume the mantle, they wouldn't be spending. It sets a new norm. So that's kind of the importance of having a deal maker there. Miss Winnie says, Colorado has been picking a fight with Ben over in, I don't know what that is. In my experience, American Jews are Israeli, Colorado. I don't, Candace Owens. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was Colorado for a second. Candace Owens been picking a fight with Ben over, has a mean girl history. She'll pick a fight to re-up a contract. Well, I mean, by her logic, would that really help her gain the contract by picking that fight? I'm not entirely sure that's a net positive if it's going to create drama. I mean, I know that, like I said, Ben is not like on the executive board, or at least he's not the CEO of the Daily Wire. It's kind of a misconception. He used to be. He's not anymore. But I don't think that the people that are leading the charge would say that Owens is gonna benefit from it, because I think they just see it as drama. I mean, I don't even know who the current CEO is, but I feel like any CEO would probably see that as drama. It probably wouldn't help her case if they're thinking from like a business perspective. That's the way I see it. I think that her remarks are just genuine. So, I mean, she's been around for a while. Like, when she first came onto the scene, a lot of people did question her past, and rightfully so, because she was like involved in some doxing thing with whatever she was doing. But I think she has proved herself since, and I think that the whole like grifter label can kind of be dropped a little bit, and she gets hit with it a lot less. And the whole like Blexit thing that like a lot of people did criticize, I criticize it, like this notion you're going to have 40% of blacks voting Republican. Doesn't happen. Republicans just are not going to be able to do it, and they're spending ridiculous, copious amounts of resources to get just like 3% more at the, abandoning certain other groups you can win just to chase that 3%. But she's kind of like dropped that as well. She just focuses on like the issues. She's more of like a commentator, and that's a good thing. So, I don't really have a problem with her. I think she's right on the conflict, 100%. Curtsy28 says, Christie said he's staying till the convention. Well, he could stay around. He's only going to take votes away. He's going to siphon them up. He's going to eat the voters who oppose him. Probably, I don't know. Just look at the guy. Stingray says, ever notice how any world conflict or domestic controversy, the government media have to pit Americans against each other over it purposely? Well, that's how the media works. Media is a business. They're gonna need to generate some sort of revenue, And a lot of times it's better for ratings if there is war. It's better that it does get hyped up. So they're going to be, I mean, that's just like how economics works. Let's see. Cameron Campbell says, Nikki is Hillary, but worst, I am a... Yeah, she does that all the time. Like, all she does is she goes out there and plays the woman card 24/7. People hated when Hillary Clinton did that. They hated it because it was just off-putting to a lot of people. Nikki Haley would do that on steroids, and a lot of the Republican base is men. That's not going to resonate well with them. I mean, a majority of them are. It's not going to help you peel off women either. The whole 6-week the whole 6-week abortion thing definitely is going to be another nail in her coffin. She was the one that was like messaging on that issue in terms of messaging like center left on it. Now she's just like trying to do anything for votes, but that's the way it is. Cameron Campbell says we didn't even get a... Yeah, I think that Utah is in the process of revising their history as well. It's kind of sad. There's no reason for it. There's really just no reason. Isaac Natal says, when you say the GOP should be more populist, do you mean that it is much worse to cave on social issues than economic ones? I think that that's kind of part of it. I don't think that's the entirety of it. I do believe that the Republican Party needs to build this coalition where they're going to be able to go out there and win these states like Wisconsin with ease, Michigan with ease, Pennsylvania with ease. They should be doing that based on demography, based on proper messaging. And I think that just having these policies that just resonate more with, these blue-collar voters, but also, you want to have low taxes. You want to appeal to the upper middle class as well. You can't just cater only to working class voters, but that's a big part of it. So I think having a measured head when it comes to economic issues, practical, wanting to bring back the American dream, that's a big part of it. I think that is definitely going to play a role in what I view like the populist angle the Republican Party should take. Obviously, and picking the right social battles and winning on them is another one I think needs to be done. Still moving the Overton window back to where it needs to be on these issues. Stop caving on social issues. And if there's some issue you have a stance on that's like unpopular, you need to revise it. Because honestly, when it comes to the issue of abortion, that's one of the issues. It's a little bit different in the way that Republicans are kind of like actually gaining ground on it. They have been gaining ground. They've obviously overturned Roe v. Wade, but then since we're gaining ground on that one issue, we don't know how to navigate it properly. Like, do we say ban it all? Like, obviously, you're not in the position to defend that. If it was all banned, that would be different. Caving on that would be saying, oh, well, you're caving on abortion. You want to make it legal. Obviously, Republicans aren't really going to be caving on it if they take a more measured approach, which kind of does make it a little bit different. Cameron Campbell says Jeremy Boring and Caleb Robinson are the CEO of the Daily Wire. It's true. Mr. Jimmy says, why the MAGA coalition united, unlike the left? I think that it's probably because there is like this unique doctrine, I guess. I mean, the left is splintered as well. I don't even know if the MAGA coalition really represents the entire right, though. So the right is kind of splintered. So I don't know if you could say that it really is an identical comparison. But I think the left does, like I said, it eats itself. It's not a sustainable coalition. You see that with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, you do. Byron8899 says, as an independent voter of California, we're told we are Americans, but it feels like in today's society we are labeled far right-winger if we love the U. Well, that's another thing. I mean, we see people say, well, if you fly a flag, it's patriotism, it's nationalistic, don't fly the flag. The ACLU, ironically enough, was crying about Donald Trump using the word America too much in one of his State of the Unions, despite them literally being called the American Civil Liberties Union. So I mean, that's kind of the environment we're dealing with. Chris Collins for 20. Thank you, Chris Collins, SMW physicist, says, I'm seriously starting to think RDS is on the spectrum with how robotic and awkward he can be, along with his shills. Well, his shills definitely. I mean, DeSantis is awkward. I'm not going to say I'm going to place him on some diagnosis. Not really my job. But I do think he's awkward. And he's not resonating with voters because he's awkward, because he doesn't have what it takes. He doesn't have it. You need it. You need the X factor. Donald Trump has it. Bill Clinton had it. Bush, to a certain extent, had it. More so than DeSantis. Even Biden, to a certain extent, you can make an argument, despite the fact that he can barely form a coherent sentence. So that's the way I see it. Let's see. Isaac Natal says, why do you oppose legal gay marriage? I oppose it because marriage is not between a man and a man or a woman and a woman. It's between a man and a woman by definition, for one. You can't cave on those definitions. That's the way it's been for quite some time, so much so to the point where cultures change because of it, that if you say that you oppose gay marriage, you're viewed as some person who's like terminally online or out of touch, despite the fact that even the average Democrat politician 10, 12 years ago had to say they were against it because it was not politically convenient. So the culture's changed vastly since then. And I think another big reason why I oppose it is because it's led to a spiraling slope effect, a slippery slope to everything else. It's not been a fallacy. We're told it's a fallacy. It's not a fallacy. You saw what happened when the second you got legal gay marriage via the Supreme Court, which is an awfully decided decision objectively, just like Roe v. Wade was an awful decision objectively. You see transgender children not even 5 years later. And this is a problem. It is a slippery slope. You can't oppose part of the agenda without opposing the entire agenda, because part of the agenda will always lead to the entirety of the agenda. That's the way it is. So Chris Collins says, how reliable are the polls showing Trump ahead? Well, the question about reliability is yet to be tested. But overall, the fact that every single poll shows him leading the popular vote, despite the polls never having him leading at all against Biden up until 2020, it shows that I would say that they are relatively reliable in the fact that it's very likely that they are not overestimating him by enough to have him losing, at least for right now, if that makes sense. A little bit of a word salad, but it's true. Mr. Burns says, where's Lalo? I don't know. You'd have to go ask him that question. All New Year 2023 says, do you think Minnesota would be flippable if Rodrigo Duterte was the mayor of Minneapolis? I don't believe anything possibly could I don't think anything possibly could flip Minnesota at this point. I mean, it's just too far gone. Also, I don't understand what the current leader of the Philippines has anything to do with the way that Minnesota. I guess if you talk about somebody who would like go out there and, you know, squash all the riots back at, it still wouldn't have likely made an impact. If anything, if Trump like handled the riots and crushed it harsher, probably do even worse in Minneapolis, because that's how broken Minneapolis is. Not saying that he shouldn't have done it. I'm just saying that Minneapolis would probably not have appreciated it because these people are insane and delusional. It's their religion is leftism. They don't. A lot of these people that live in the Minneapolis area, they're non-religious. So what is their religion? Everybody has a religion, whether people like to admit it or not. I mean, you're going to have to fill that void with something. They fill it with leftism. Mr. Jimmy says, if Haley was the nominee, could RFK take MAGA votes? Yes, absolutely. And there's a delusion that RFK would hurt Trump more than somebody like DeSantis. And it's like, no, the Trump base liked him initially, wrongly so. But they liked him initially because he's vaguely anti-establishment. They liked his vibes. If you have RFK Jr. against Trump, the people that care the most about the vaccine or whatever, they're still likely going to choose Trump over DeSantis in a primary, first of all, because they just tend to be more anti-establishment overall, and they're definitely going to choose Trump in the general election. But somebody like DeSantis, RFK Jr., going up against a Haley would easily, possibly even take my vote away, even though I don't like RFK Jr. Nikki Haley is just a no-go for me, especially with what she's saying and what she wants to do. Like, is having like a national social credit score and mass immigration and foreign wars and all this stuff any worse than Joe Biden with a Republican Senate and a Republican Congress? I can't say that Nikki Haley would be an improvement. I just can't. Maybe somebody could formulate an argument as to why she would be, but I just literally cannot do it. Oh, the Supreme Court, she's going to appoint some weak justices to that too, probably. I don't know. I agree that that's something, but nevertheless, I don't think I could bring myself to vote for either, based off of the fact that we would have a social credit score system that I think would be far worse than any like Supreme Court appointment, which in the next 4 years, I mean, is it really likely that any Republicans going to step down? I mean, I can't see it. I know we have some justices getting old and that can be a liability, but still. But yeah, when it comes to RFK Jr., he's mostly going to take away people that don't like Trump and don't like Biden and just can't bring themselves to vote for either of them. Much of those voters back in 2020 voted for Biden. So if anything, I think it helps Trump a little bit. SMW's physicist says, you never fully answered my super chat. Well, sorry about that. How's Sabatini's campaign from Florida going? Good, bad? I have no idea. I haven't really checked in on that. I know that he's running against, I think, Webster. And I think Trump is probably going to endorse Webster because Webster endorsed Trump over DeSantis, despite Webster previously being somebody that was propping up DeSantis. But I do think that it's probably, I love the guy. Do I think he's like from an electoral standpoint in the best shape right now? Maybe not. But I mean, Webster, I think had the Trump endorsement before, or maybe I think Trump stayed out and he almost lost to Laura Loomer, who didn't even have social media. So it's entirely possible that Sabatini could pull off an upset because Webster is an underperformer. So we really have yet to see what's going to happen there. The election's going to be quite some time away. But yeah, I think if Webster endorsed DeSantis for president, Trump probably would have endorsed Sabatini just because Sabatini has name recognition, would be somewhat viable, probably would go out there and take on Webster. So, all right, last call for Super Chats. We are approximately an hour and 17 minutes in. We have 600 viewers, despite it being a Sunday night, and it's almost midnight on the East Coast, and we still have a ridiculous amount of viewership. So thanks everyone for tuning in, taking time out of their Sunday night to come by the show, show your support. You guys have been doing a great job. And this will be the last call for Super Chats. We'll end the stream in a couple of minutes if we don't get any. But last call for Super Chats. We could also read the regular chat, see what people are saying in the regular chat, because some people, maybe they can't afford Super Chats, and definitely at the end of the stream, we like to take a little peek in the regular chat, see what's going on. So RFK is an awful alternative to Trump, 90% liberal. I agree. Oh, but he makes you feel vindicated about one issue. Why? Because he opposes mandates for vaccines. So does Trump. If you look at Trump's Agenda 47, his policy on opposing the mandates is extremely tough. People will say Trump is soft on COVID. A lot of it is revisionist history. I'm not saying he handled it perfectly. I think he did things that I would not have done myself. That being said, the attacks on Trump regarding COVID, a little bit overblown. Should not have shielded the jab as much as he did. DeSantis pushed it 1,600 times. A lot of the attack lines that the DeSantis people are using on Trump just fall flat when you look at reality. They do. I want to hear Ref's opinion on why Vivek isn't better than Trump. Well, I don't think he is a lock to win if he wins. I mean, the polls show he's not, which the polls, obviously, he's being attacked a lot. I do think that they're probably lagging behind because of that. But it's just mainly because of the fact that Vivek is weak on trade. He's weak on immigration, comparatively speaking. And while I like him on some issues, I just don't fully believe that his policies are ideal. I think he is a decent guy overall. I think that every time I watch the debates, it's usually going to be because I want to see Vivek go out there and attack Nikki Haley. And I'm sure he'll be in like the Trump administration. But either way, even if Vivek was actually like better than Trump, he still has no chance at beating him in a primary. So I kind of view it as somewhat of a wasted vote, which I know that people will say that's a little bit of a fallacy, but like the guy would have actually had a chance to take off if he was viable. He would be polling higher than DeSantis and Haley, and obviously Christie in New Hampshire if he was. But nevertheless, I like Vivek. I do. I think that he brings some things to the table. I think he's better than Trump on some issues, but a lot of issues he falls short. And the whole immigration thing, a little bit murky, saying he supports increasing visas, saying he wants to re-enter TPP, the Obama-Paul Ryan trade disaster that DeSantis voted to greenlight, that Trump pulled us out of. And even Biden won't go back into it. Even Hillary Clinton had to pretend not to support it. Like, that definitely plays a role in, like, Michigan. You talk about electoral viability. That's kind of the way I see it. It's not the only issue, but it'll be wedged against a Republican in the future if they tend to be more pro-free trade. If DeSantis gets the nomination, Biden will attack him on it. It will be an issue that will go to the forefront. Biden will try to wedge the Trump base in those Rust Belt states against Ron DeSantis. And he might do so effectively. Not that they would support Biden, but that they might vote for somebody like RFK Jr., they might stay home, etc. Trump's saving the Republican Party right now, and a lot of people just don't realize it. He's the one keeping it on life support, and they're going to have to build off of it. They can't run these diet Trumps that are awkward without charisma like DeSantis, and they got to go out there and just learn how to win. Manny says, thoughts on Miles? I already covered this earlier in the stream. Good thing. I don't know how based he's going to be per se, but it is good that they have better leadership. Cameron Campbell says, Thanksgiving game, try and write all 50 states without looking in 10 minutes. I could do that. I could do that easily. I don't know how it's a Thanksgiving game, though, but see, DeSantis is so popular. What happened? His campaign happened. That's a big part of it. His campaign happened. His approval rating in Florida's dipped. Trump's beating him in the Florida primary by like 40 points. It's not looking too good for him. Vivek is being underpolled. I will say Vivek does have this ability to reach out to younger voters, and I really appreciate that about Vivek, because so many people even in the Republican base, politicians, they just write off younger voters. Oh, they're going to be liberal anyways. They don't really cater to their policy needs, but they need to. I mean, there are people in this generation who are intelligent, who are capable people, and you see a lot of people in the DeSantis camp particularly, they're going out there. They will trash younger voters who are like backing Trump. Oh, you're young, this, that, and the other thing. You're barely old enough to vote. What you say doesn't matter. It's like, that's not going to win over younger voters. I'm not saying it's only the DeSantis campaign. It is the conservative Republican base at large, and it's mainly the old guard, I will say, though. And that's kind of an issue. So I think we're going to end the stream. But yeah, another thing Vivek is better than Trump on is like probably getting rid of some of these agencies, like really, really gutting the IRS. The ATF should not exist. Some of these other things should not exist. Like, I don't think that's outlandish. Like, I will say that overall, for people that do like to trash a lot of these like libertarian types, I will say that I'm definitely for reducing the overall size of government, despite willing to be more likely to use government power to get things done, which a lot of conservatives will shy away from, and they'll say, oh, well, small government, they'll cling to these principles. See, people are talking about the Lions, which means I gotta bring up the, do I have to really bring up the meme? Do I really have to bring up the meme? I had the meme set up. I could find it. Oh, here it is. I found the meme. It's an old meme, but I can play it. It's the different score, but it did call me back to this because the last time the Lions came down 10 points to beat the Bears in epic fashion, this meme was born. Take a listen.
And then boom, all of a sudden, I go from winning by a lot to losing a tight race. It's corrupt. Detroit is corrupt. I have a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it. But Detroit is totally corrupt. Look at this. Look at this.
It's true. It's a good meme. It's a classic. I had to play that this video, but yeah, it is true. Let's see. Anyone else in chat? Yeah, but Lions are back, it seems. Trump is back, it seems. Things are good. We got a lot of work to do, obviously, and we'll keep the content going as we get closer to the primaries, as we get closer to the 2024 election. So, all right, guys, we are going to end it right now, right here. Like the stream down below, subscribe, hit the bell. I'll see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.